Welcome, folks, to G4G. I am Napalm Dawn, and today we're going to talk about this article that appeared in .esports about Marvel Snap having some matchmaking issues. So even though this is 2 days old, I happened to just come across this article today on March 9th, but it was dated back to March 7th. The article states that there was a Marvel Snap player who was at rank 33 and shared a picture of himself over on Reddit, and he was facing a player that he knew to be infinite because of the card back that the player was using, which is only a card back that you can receive if you make infinite, which is rank 100 plus. So he said, hey, this seems to be a matchmaking issue. And one of the things that is an issue here is that all players who were rank 100 were dropped to rank 70, but he was down at 33, so that isn't mathing out. Even if people could be dropped far enough for the math to work out, this isn't necessarily new. And I want to bring you guys back to an old Marvel game that existed from 2012 to 2016, and that was Marvel Avengers Alliance. So you could see here that Marvel Avengers Alliance had 31 seasons before the game died. But some of the things that I want to focus on are pre-season 17 and 19 and 24 and 26 over here, because that's going to be one of the core cruxes of my idea. So the way that it used to work in Marvel Avengers Alliance PvP is that you had ranks silver, gold, diamond, vibranium, and adamantium. And for every standard season, you got a weapon around diamond, you tended to get a suit around vibranium, and then a character or a hero was available if you got adamantium for free. 1 month after the character was released, the character would be purchasable through game means. I don't remember if it was gold, which was the real life currency conversion, or if you could get them for command points. I'm going to take a look at Deadpool here. 135 command points. So yes, eventually they do become available for command points, and then there are sometimes specials where you get them for gold. So if you are dedicated enough in PvP, you would be able to get the hero for free, Deadpool, Cable, Psylocke. If you were not as skilled in PvP, you wouldn't necessarily miss out. You would just be about a month behind. And then they had these pre-seasons where you got what was called armory items. Now, armory items were things that you slotted to a specific area in the game that boosted your stats when doing PvP. As you could see for these lethal hand wraps, this was a offensive tilted item. The offense is higher than the defense. If we go back and take a look at the statue head, this was reversed. It was the defensive tilted item. The offensive side was weaker, and then the final one, the medallions of wisdom, were balanced where they would be equal stats. So what the armory did is it allowed you to beef up your stats in a customizable way in PvP. If you were running a heavy offensive team like Quicksilver, Spitfire, Psylocke, Juggernaut, Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, Spider-Man Noir, anything where you try to get out of combat early by doing really heavy hitting destructive attacks in rounds 1 and 2, you would tilt your armory to offense. If you were running a slow burn team like Enchantress or Pestilence Beast or Red Hulk, you would tilt towards defensive items, and you would let your dots or your damage over time items tick down, and you would win the war of attrition rather than the war of like straight nuking and nuking early. The pre-seasons are the idea that I kind of really want to talk about over here. As you know, in Marvel Snap, everybody waits almost to the minute for a season to kick over to a new season. People get hyped for cards. They do that last minute scramble for their rank and hopefully get infinite. Well, that kind of thing did happen in Marvel Avengers Alliance. People would scramble to get their final ranks by Monday at 3 or 4 o'clock, I think is when every PvP season tended to end. I believe by 5 o'clock it was definitely done. And what I used to like to do back in the day is when I was streaming, I would stream that last hour or so of PvP. We'd collect the rewards on stream and talk about the season, so on and so forth. Well, the thing about Marvel Avengers Alliance is that there was a gap from season to season. There would be that nothingness where PvP would not be available, but practice matches were. I think Marvel Snap could benefit from this idea by making a gap from season to season. Instead of doing it like this, minute to minute gameplay, take a season and give it 2 weeks. So you have a season for a month, 2-week gap, season, 2-week gap, so on and so forth. And taking Playdom's idea for these pre-seasons, they use those pre-seasons to attempt to try out new changes. One of the more infamous pre-seasons was when they did the stat squish. Your agent could get up to level 300, but eventually they changed it so that I think every PvP season was capped at a certain level. Like your agent would get capped at 200 or 100 or something like that. It just made it easier. And then one season they nerfed stamina. Stamina didn't really used to be a thing in PvP. It was nearly unlimited, but then they made stamina a viable stat. If you assaulted somebody's stamina, they recharged. That hero or that agent couldn't do an action. So they would test these changes in the pre-seasons. Now, you didn't get a hero or a weapon or a suit, but you got the armory items. So it still was handy to play the season. 5 gold is a drop in the bucket. This was really, really minuscule. But it was handy because you got to test teams, you got to test heroes, gear, team-ups, changes, everything that would change from season to season. You could use the preseason as a little bit of a tester ground because it didn't go on your record. It didn't really matter if you were adamantium or silver during the preseasons because nothing really big was at stake. Now here in 26, you could see the silver count was pretty good. The gold was reasonable, but you got 12 armory items. And this was a pretty good armory item at the time. But still, it wasn't mega important. What I think Marvel Snap could do is they could run preseason gaps, wedges between the big seasons where people would be able to test decks and not have too many things be on the line. Now, again, in Marvel Avengers Alliance, everybody reset to the lowest rank when every season reset. The thing was, you had so much time between the seasons, you could beef up quite a bit. So if you had finished in Diamond in a season, you could very easily take the time off and build an adamantium or vibranium team pretty easily. So maybe what Marvel Snap can do is, instead of running their seasons minute to minute, build in 2-week gaps and make little mini, less consequential seasons. And in those seasons, what they could do is have a bar that's only 10 ranks. Start at 1, 10 is the max. And maybe what you could do is have titles, avatars, variants be what you earn each level up. And at the 4, 6, 8, and 10, you could do the cards that you want to release as a rental. So for example, over here, the March 2023 cards, you had Nimrod, Master Mold, Negasonic, Kitty Pryde. The February one, there was 5, but we'll just take the March one, for example. So at 4, 6, 8, and 10, you would earn one of the 4 cards that they plan to release temporarily. That would give you time to build a deck with that card, test it out, play people, see how it interacts, develop counters, and Second Dinner gets to see how a card plays out in the wild, because players will always have infinite more power to test and come up with crazy things that nobody's ever imagined until the player base gets a hold of it. Marvel Avengers Alliance was rife with that. The devs never could predict what us players would mix and match between heroes and ISOs and agent gear. It was crazy what we could come up with, and we would always reveal the shortcomings or the overpoweredness of something or the out and out bugs. There was a season where Electro, Beta Ray Bill, and 2 pieces of agent gear would crash the game. So all you would do is put it on your defensive team. When somebody went and fought your defensive team and your agent used that gear, the game would crash, forcing the human being behind the offensive team to reload their game because it was on the web, so you had to hit refresh. And then that would result in a loss for the human player, and your defensive team controlled by the AI would get a win. You wouldn't fall down the ladder. Now, eventually, the devs would catch that. They would call it a bug. They'd fix it. And sometimes you might even get banned for doing stuff like that. But it goes to show you that the players, because there's so many more players than devs and QA and playtesters, we're always going to come up with the crazy things. So if you take a preseason and allow people to earn the cards temporarily during the preseason, you're going to see how the decks run. You're going to see some win rates a little bit. People are going to be able to test out counters. And the preseason still has value because you'll have permanent titles, permanent avatars, permanent variants. But then your intended release cards, you loan them to the player for the preseason and you see what they do. Now, like for me personally, I think Living Tribunal could be a ridiculously overpowered card. Having that one get play tested when you get to do things like Iron Man with him or Omega Red and Warpath, and seeing the interaction of how jacking up one lane into the hundreds or the thousands in power and then splitting it out. I think that is the perfect card for a play test out in the wild. So here, I don't know how somebody at 33 fought somebody who was previously an infinite. Sandbagging is always a thing. Sandbagging occurs when you are ridiculously strong, but you do things to stay low so that you continually fight easy opponents. In some games, it's a matter of going on big win streaks and then letting yourself, kind of throwing the matches and letting yourself get knocked down. Or when you're talking defensive teams and offensive teams, you put in a really crap defensive team and you just whittle it down and snap. You could just always be trying to snap and then just be playing absolutely trash cards. So sandbagging is a thing, and there are times when you're going to fight somebody above your station. In Marvel Avengers Alliance, because there was a reset between every single season, day one is like people getting on a Japanese subway. Everybody would be piling in, everybody would be playing, and you would have these silver level teams fighting adamantium level teams because everybody had been reset. So whereas things were normally spread out like this, everybody was clustered right over here day one because everybody started at like 700 or 800. I forget what the rating was. And then eventually as the season would go on, it would smooth itself out a little bit. If Snap had a big reset like that every season, I don't think it would work quite as well as it did in Marvel Avengers Alliance. I think people would get really tired of the grind going back up to Infinite. If you had a drop of, say, if you were above 50, you could only drop to 50. So 100 would drop to 50, 70 would drop to 50. So 50 and up could be a notch, and 10 to 50 or 0 to 50 for a new player could be a notch. They would give something for people to look forward to in terms of climbing ranks, because not everybody's going to climb to infinite. But if you could climb to, say, 52, you have a nice little ledge to fall back on. The way Marvel Duel did it is that you would only drop one whole rank, which essentially would just be 10 in Marvel Snap. So instead of dropping 30, like Infinite, down to 70, you would only drop 10. That also could smooth things out for the player, whereas you would never see somebody from Infinite Plus go down to 70 and run into somebody in the beginning of the season that had just barely gotten there last time. So you have somebody who's at 70 because it's a struggle for them to get there, but then you have that Infinite person just marauding through those early days over there. If people only drop 10, that elite is going to stay clustered at the top and be ultra competitive and not be crapping on people below them. So that's another possible idea, is just drop people only 10 or so, and not drop them any further than that. This way they could climb out of their station, but if they have 2 or 3 seasons in a row where they're just not doing good, they're not going to face somebody who's just going to, smush them like that. So I personally think what Second Dinner could do is take advantage of Marvel Avengers Alliance old preseason idea that Playdom used to do, and introduce cards during the play season on loan, rental basically, release, allow players to design decks around those cards, get them out there, get them in the wild, start seeing win rates and statistics and crazy combinations and everything, and then end the preseason and start your new full season. And as Second Dinner's perspective, when you're in those last 1 or 2 days of the preseason, you've got some pretty good stats as to how things will work, and that will let you know if, when the season drops, your card is where you wanted it to be. It wasn't winning too much, it wasn't winning too little, the cost was right, the power was right, like what they did to Leader, what they did to Spider-Woman, what they did to Sandman, for example. They might actually be able to get that data and release the card into its permanent state without having to worry about a nerf or a buff a whole month down the road. They'll get that data earlier and maybe be able to hit their targets right on the permanent release day, rather than permanently releasing it and then seeing how the chips fall. So that's my idea. If you made it all the way through this video, thank you. Certainly appreciate it. Think about giving a like and subscribe if you want. If you were an old Marvel Avengers Alliance fan and you're still aching to have that game back, check out the channel. There's plenty of videos on a remake of Marvel Avengers Alliance called Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux that you can download today and play on your computer without even needing an internet connection, other than to actually get download. So check out my channel. You'll see some videos on it with links to downloads, our Facebook, and our Discord. Thanks for listening to me. Napalm out.